Welcome to the Heavy Mental Health Show. And now, here to help teach leaders how to lift the stigma of mental health, your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heavy Mental Health Show, Riffing with Tom Dutta. My name is John McComb. For the last 50 years, I have been a broadcaster, talk show host, reporter, and interviewer, and it is my pleasure to be involved with Tom Dutta on the Heavy Mental Health Show. Tom Dutta is, first and foremost, a very, very good friend of mine and a man who I respect greatly for the work that he has done in trying to reduce the stigma around mental health issues. Tom is an award-winning CEO, best-selling author, and radio and film producer, transforming leaders and companies worldwide. Tom believes real change starts at the top. He's dedicated to changing our view of mental health in the workplace by breaking the silence, telling his story of struggle, and being a leader by example. Tommy, it is always good to talk to you.
Thank you, John. It's great to be on my show.
It's the Heavy Mental Health Show, Riffing with Tom Dutta. Talk about that. Where did that come from?
Well, it's a bit of a story. First of all, I want to mention that this is our first episode. We'll call this the introduction. And what we're going to use this for, John, is when people want to come on and be guests on the show, I'll ask them to listen to this. And so if you're listening to it now, you're going to listen till the end. You're going to get back to Tom and say, you know what, the narrative sounds good. I'd love to be on the show. It fits. Well, that's what this is for. Well, how did this all begin? The Heavy Mental Health Show, Riffing with Tom Dutta, it goes back a lifetime, John. But I'll take you back to February 29th, 2020. Standing on the stage at Bell Center for the Performing Arts. I did my first TEDx talk, and the title of that talk was How Leaders Can Lift the Stigma of Mental Health. And the through line in the talk was, it's okay to say when you're not okay. And I revealed a deeply personal story for the first time. And there was a guy sitting in the audience, and at the end I was humbled. I had a standing ovation, 1,000 people, and there's this voice yelled out, "We love you, Tommy." And I walked off the stage and I was mesmerized, and I walked in the audience, and then this guy, I came up to him and I said, "Hey," and he said, "Did you hear me yelling out, 'We love you, Tommy?'" And he gave me a hug, and well, that was you, John. And so you were part of the journey. The second memorable moment behind the show was back in August 2018. Now, I talked about this in the TED Talk. I was doing the Ride to Conquer Cancer. I mean, it was incredible. I rode 225 kilometers over 2 days on your bicycle. I didn't have a bicycle. I had to borrow John's. And it was to raise funds for cancer. Now, a friend of mine who's an engineer at a firm in Vancouver, British Columbia, lost his daughter to leukemia at age 2. And I know some people who struggled with cancer. So I did this ride. I was a late entrance. I raised a few $1,000s. And the first night after doing the 100 kilometers, my wife and I stayed in a motel. And John, I slipped in the bathtub. I literally fell and cracked a hole in the tub with my head. I blacked out, and I didn't know till a day later that I had a brain injury, and it stopped my life. I sunk into a cycle of depression and all those things that come with that type of thing. One of the things that happen is that people who have mental health challenges, they tend to deny, the truth. They don't reach out for help. And I was encouraged to see a psychiatrist, and I did. And after doing that, he said, "Tom, this isn't about medication only. It's about learning some skills." And they sent me to a course called CBT, which for the listeners, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognition is your thoughts. Behavior is how your thoughts behave. And I hadn't heard this in 30 years as an executive, John, but we can actually teach our brains how to think. And through neuroplasticity, it's called, we can mold the brain. It's like plastic. And so they sent me for 9 weeks, and I'll just finish with this. I went into a classroom, and sitting at the table were 13 other people who were struggling with anxiety and depression. And it opened up the whole world to me. I mean, these people were in pain. And 90 minutes each week for 9 weeks, we were taught skills. And one thing happened at the end of that session on graduation day that it stopped me. And one lady put up her hand. She said, "Why aren't these things taught in school to children? Why isn't everybody learning this? If I had learned it when I was young, I probably wouldn't be where I am today." And the answer was, you need to be diagnosed with a mental illness to get into the course. And I went away from that thinking my mission is to take my TED Talk, build on that, and take the skills I've learned, John, and actually teach people how to learn and lift the stigma of mental health through learning new things.
Well, you've been very successful with The Way of the Quiet Warrior, your book and your podcast and all the great work that you've done around that. So how is the Heavy Mental Health Show, Riffing with Tom Dutta, going to build on that and take it to the next level?
Yeah, the Quiet Warrior radio show was incredible. And, we've done 150 interviews so far. And I started noticing a thread, John, that came through the stories. I would bring leaders on, much like yourself, and they would tell their stories of life, but in that were threads of mental health. And I thought after, why are they revealing that on this show? Well, we're in business or in society, they're not talking openly about it. And it was again linking back to that, the fear, the stigma, the shame. So this show will be a combination of solo casts where I teach skills, the 166 skills that I learned in CBT training, and also bringing on people to share their authentic stories. So we're really going to build on the Quiet Warrior show. There's some fun stuff behind the name of this show that I can talk about as well.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, because the heavy metal that intros and extros the show has a lot to do with the Heavy Mental Health Show title that you came up with. What was the genesis for all that?
Well, taking you back to my childhood again, you're probably thinking that this guy needs some therapy because he's talking about his childhood too much. Well, listen, back when I was a kid, I think I was 16 years old, John. And I worked with a buddy called Al. His name was Al. He's a good guy, kind of a stocky football player looking guy. And we were filing tax returns at the Revenue Canada Agency here in Surrey, British Columbia. Believe it or not, when computers didn't exist. And Al had this Walkman on, and he had his headset on. And I'm down the aisle from him, and I'm hearing this ridiculous noise coming out of his headset. I'm going, what are you listening to? And he said, here, take a listen. So I did. And it was Iron Maiden. Now, if there's any headbangers out there, this was my first introduction, John, to heavy metal. And it actually kind of grew on me. And, here's the thing, John. Some people criticize that genre of music, but let me tell you what I learned about it and why the title, it's reflective in that. As I matured, I started realizing the lyrics behind some of these heavy metal songs were amazing. And the musicians had this incredible talent of belting out the music on stage for hours. Now, here's the thing, John. When I was trained to do my TED Talk by a professional speaking coach, she said, I want you to pick a song, go in your bathroom every morning, look in the mirror and belt it out. And I said, why? She said, because I'm going to get your vocal range. So every morning I was belting out Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. And here's the thing, John. John, after the first time, you've been in radio 40, 50 years, you know about voice. My voice cracked. I started coughing and choking. And then I realized that the only way to actually get my voice to manage it and be healthy is through practice and through learning skills and a lifelong commitment to having healthy vocals. And then that was a connection. It's like, okay, there's something here about the show. So let's take the leap into the title, the Heavy Mental Health Show. There you have it, instead of heavy metal. And then riffing, as you know, I play guitar. And if you have a chord and you play it over and over again, you start creating a riff, and then others in the band join in. On a podcast like this, I might say something and then you join in and we start riffing on a topic, and it takes us everywhere. So here's the deal about the actual show intro, outro music, which you mentioned. The audience has heard the intro. They'll hear the outro at the end. When we have mental health, and I said this to my designer who created that was a DJ. And he said, what do you want for your intro, outro? And I said, well, I want something that people can live through to feel mental health. So the intro is actually like heavy metal music. It's loud, it's noisy. And this is exactly what happens when I dealt with the depression, anxiety in my head. You have racing thoughts. You have this feeling of despair. Sometimes a feeling of craziness, irrational thinking. Heavy metal. And then the primal scream. You remember that, John? There's a moment.
I do.
The primal scream is the point of no return when we deal with mental health or mental illness. And we get to a point where we say, I can't take it anymore. And we then decide to get angry. We scream maybe, and we go and get some help. At that moment in that intro, that's the primal scream that I heard and many have heard, to go and find ways to get healthier mentally. And on the outro, what you'll hear is the music then calms down. And that's what we want people on the show to get, is that you come into the show feeling like it feels like to have some stresses, some anxiety, and you leave the show in this calm state where you've learned something. You can take something away. I want to finish with this on that there's a think, feel, and do here. What do I want the audience to think? I want the audience, when they listen to the show, to think that it's okay to say when they're not okay, that they can talk about this and lift the stigma of mental health. I want them to feel that they have courage and hope, that they can live a good life managing mental health with not just medication, John, but learning skills. And what do I want people to do? Well, if you're hearing me, I obviously want you to do something with this and take action, use the skills, practice them, see if they'll work for you, pass it on to somebody else.
Well, Tom, again, from me to you, congratulations on all of the incredible hard work. And you've worked incredibly hard trying to get the message out there, but also you've been dealing with your own issues. You mentioned the fall during the bike ride. You have dealt with so many challenges, and yet you are so committed to this and so focused on this. I wish you all of the very best. I know this is going to be as big or bigger than the Quiet Warrior project was. So I'm proud to be a part of this, and I wish you all the very best.
Well, John, I want to leave you with a final thought here, if I can take another minute, and that is about you. I wanted to finish this explaining what a typical guest might look like. Now, the show will be doing solo casts of me teaching skills, but I will bring on, and I want to get people to be guests. John is a typical guest. Let me tell everybody about John. John spent 50 years as a reporter, anchor, and talk show host in some of the biggest radio stations in North America. I mean, you can hear his voice. For 36 years, he was featured on our local CKNW radio in Vancouver. And he retired in 2019, and I laugh because he never retired, because he started his own podcast, the John McComb podcast, because he was curious and thirsty to get the truth out there. But here's the part about John's story I want you to hear, that John wrestled with depression and anxiety his entire life, the product of a wildly dysfunctional home growing up. And for years, he suffered in silence until one day, totally burned out, John was forced to take 7 months off work to get his mental health under control. And then after returning to CKNW, he became an advocate to reduce the stigma around mental health. And in 2015, the Governor General's Caring Canadian Award was given to John by the then Governor General David Johnston. Everybody, when you come on the show, after you've heard this episode, I want you, if you want to be a guest, to come on, check the ego at the door, and reveal your whole story so that we can learn from you that there is life on the other side. Thank you, John, for being part of this mission.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it very, very much, and it's a great pleasure to be involved in the Heavy Mental Health Show, Riffing with Tom Dutta.
Thank you for listening to the Heavy Mental Health Show. KRE-AT is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.KREAT.ca